Welcome and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Doris Wise Montrose, President of Children of Jewish Holocaust Survivors. The David Horowitz Freedom Center and Children of Jewish Holocaust Survivors have joined together to bring to the community yet another unique individual with a unique and important message and messaging system, Bosch Fawstin. His name and work may be new to you, but I promise it will not be long before he is being attacked by the media and various organizations and voices dedicating to doing just that. That will be the surest sign that he is doing something right. We are privileged to have with us tonight David Horowitz. The founder and president of the David Horowitz Freedom Center. Children of Jewish Holocaust Survivors and the David Horowitz Freedom Center have and continue to work together because we share a common goal, survival of our civilization and our way of life. In all modesty, I believe that our two organizations are among the best in enlightening and empowering people with knowledge, and the greatest enemy of our enemy is that we know them. My friend Mark Tapson will introduce our guest speaker, Bosch Fawstin. Many of you may know Mark Tapson, having read his work, which appears on a multitude of sites, including Front Page, Big Hollywood, Pajamas Media, Town Hall, and elsewhere. He is a Shillman Fellow for the Horowitz Freedom Center. Among the film projects he has worked on are The Stoning of Soroya M. and the controversial miniseries The Path to 9/11. Mark interviewed Bosch for Front Page, and I have asked Mark to introduce Bosch tonight. Bosch Fawstin will be available after the presentation to sign his books, and you can purchase them for yourself and for your friends for Christmas and Hanukkah. I would bet that the recipient will not forget to send you a thank you card. Tomorrow night is the eve of Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. A Happy New Year, Shana Tova, to the Jewish people and all other infidels. May peace be upon us. I couldn't resist that. Kindly turn off your cell phones, pagers, and other electronic devices. And now I introduce to you Mark Tapson.
Thanks, Doris. Thanks, Doris. Thanks, everybody. Doris is right about these two organizations and how great they are. Imagine, for example, how much better off the world would be if the United Nations were replaced by the David Horowitz Freedom Center. 10 years after 9/11, the clash of civilizations, or rather the clash of civilization and barbarism, rages on. It's manifested in our wars abroad, terrorism at home, and occasional domestic confrontations like the Ground Zero Mosque controversy. Less obvious is how the clash is manifested in pop culture, books for example. Apart from thriller novels where we are still allowed to pit good guys against Islamic terrorists, the more serious novels are basically consist of navel-gazing and moral equivalence. Hollywood pumps out films and TV shows that essentially blame America and the CIA and capitalism for Islamic rage. The music industry, in its insanely shallow narcissistic bubble, just pretends that no such clash even exists. But what about comic books and graphic novels? How is our epic struggle with Islamic fundamentalism playing out in that very popular subculture? I'll give you just two examples. DC Comics, the home of Batman, decided recently to send him to Paris and replaced his sidekick Robin with a French Algerian Muslim superhero known as Nightrunner. Nightrunner, that's interesting. I wonder if it's because every night he ran alongside other Muslim youth through the Paris suburbs setting fire to cars. Wholly unassimilated immigrants, Batman. A comic book creation out of the Middle East called The 99 has received the blessing of Obama himself. It's becoming an animated TV series. It features 99 superheroes, each reflecting a different aspect of Islamic culture. I can't wait to follow the adventures of Captain Sharia and Stoning Girl. I made those up. If you think comic books and graphic novels are kid stuff and that we can ignore this front in the clash of civilizations, then you don't understand what the jihadists and their leftist support network do. That pop culture is the way to win the hearts and minds of our youth and to pave the way for submission to Allah. So whom do we have on our side in this arena? Who's taking the fight to the jihadists? I'm glad you asked. You're about to meet an uncompromising artistic vision of a unique warrior against the stealth jihad. Bosch Fawstin is a cartoonist whose debut graphic novel, Table for One, scored an Eisner Award nomination. That's the comics industry equivalent of an Oscar nomination. His new graphic novel is called The Infidel, a story of Muslim twin brothers whose lives veer in opposite directions in the wake of the 9/11 attacks. He's also a front page magazine contributor and the author-illustrator of Propaganda, Drawing the Line Against Jihad, a collection of images and essays that serve as a sort of a companion piece to The Infidel. And if you missed my interview with Bosch yesterday, I urge you, on Front Page Magazine, I urge you to check it out. My questions were fascinating. No, seriously, Bosch makes for a fascinating interview. I urge you to look it up on Front Page. One last word before I bring Bosch up, a word about courage. Kurt Vestergaard, the 79-year-old artist who famously drew Muhammad with a bomb for a turban a few years ago, is still targeted for death by jihadists. Molly Norris, the cartoonist who was the inspiration for Everybody Draw Muhammad Day, is living in hiding in America under a different name. The creators of South Park on the Comedy Channel received death threats for depicting an animated Muhammad in disguise. Cartoons are serious business to our enemy, and it takes real courage to crawl into that arena and give them serious business right back. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to present a friend of mine and a courageous artist of the resistance, Bosch Fawstin.
First thing I want to say is my name is Bosch and I'm a recovering Muslim. I was born and raised... Yes. First time talking. Apologize. I was born and raised Muslim. My parents were from Albania. They came to America in 1969. And we were raised by... They were not as devout as I guess they could have been, which is good for me and good for my siblings. But we, anti-Semitism, misogyny was the norm growing up. And that's not good for kids or for anyone, especially America. So I was going to say, we are gathered here today because Islam does not mean peace. Islam means submission. Submission to the will of a malevolent God, Allah. And, when 9/11 hit, I was in New York the night before, going to an art class. And it was raining as hell, and I remember that. Next day, my sister calls me up and tells me to watch the television. Turn it on, see the horror, see the buildings falling, and one of the things that will stay with me till I die, I saw them, as we all did, those jumping from the towers. But then on top of that, we saw celebrations across the world. Otherwise, normal human beings, I guess, as opposed to the jihadists. But they weren't. They celebrated the mass murder of Americans. And they passed candy around to each other. And that was another sight that just struck me to the point where I knew I would have to respond as an artist. I had a desire to kill. I had to turn that into my art and figure out a way to go about it, the best way I possibly could. So what I did was I had to go back and understand Islam, what it truly meant, what jihad was, and were these individuals who flew those planes and buildings absolute, consistent practitioners of Islam. And I found out that they were. And so if I just, I prepared some statements here. I just want to go through them. My study of Islam had led to, these strange things. Like there's something in a village in Pakistan called, they call it the brides of the Quran. It's Muslim women who, if they can't find first cousins to marry, they have to marry the Quran. And the one benefit of that I see is that the Quran can't beat them. But that's about it. They're basically, they stay home all day, all night, and live a miserable life, as most Muslim women do. And also other stories, like in Saudi Arabia, there was a building on fire, women were running out the building, but they weren't wearing their headscarves. So I believe they're called the Matawa, the religious police. They were throwing the women back into the fire because they weren't wearing their headscarves. This is what kind of insanity happens from that kind of mentality, where you got to cover your women no matter what. And then also, growing up, there was, even for the least devout Muslims, there was an admiration for Hitler. You know, a very common, casual admiration for him. To the point where, I refer to him as Islam's favorite infidel. There was one quote-unquote Palestinian who said about Hitler, he admired him to an extent, but he didn't kill enough Jews, as he put it. And this is the kind of casual evil that you get raised with, even from the least devout Muslims. Then I'm thinking about Hitler's book in the Middle East. It's a bestseller, Mein Kampf. It's translated to My Jihadi. And then, as I say about Islam, it is an interpretation of Islam that is the problem. But the further problem, the bigger problem, is that it's Muhammad's interpretation, the founder of Islam. There's nothing in the Quran that will stay the hand of anyone who wants to kill infidels. Nothing. And there are different sects of Islam. There's one sect called the Ahmadiyya sect, and they do reject violent jihad. They're the only sect that rejects violent jihad, but the founder of it, Muhammad Ahmadiyya, considered himself a prophet. And of course, after Muhammad, there are no more prophets, so they're considered illegitimate, and they're killed for rejecting jihad. Post 9/11, I'm thinking about the reaction to 9/11 from politicians, from our leaders, from the intellectuals. They couldn't wait to hear Islam means peace. From our president, September 12, 2001, he goes to a mosque flanked by 2 members of CARE, the stealth jihadists, and he tells us Islam is peace. And to me, that was, in the age of bailouts, that was probably will be the most costliest bailout in American history. Because it doesn't allow us to actually look at the enemy seriously, take them on in the way that they have to be taken on, the way they take us on. I make a joke, I say, we wage war the way they wage peace in the last 10 years. I'm just thinking about so many things. I mean, I'm an artist, I'm a cartoonist, so I tend to draw my ideas far more than I discuss them. So after I'm done here, I'm going to show you some of my cartoons on Islam and jihad. Excuse me, I just, if you were honest pre 9/11, you entered the world of 9/11 with a desire to know what Islam means. You don't assume it means, peace. Why the hell would you? Because the president says so. He has a vested interest in saying that he's a politician. But if you were dishonest, you basically were told Islam is peace and you followed through. And one of the villains, I think, post 9/11 was a character called David Forte, who was George Bush's, I don't know if he was a religious advisor or a quote-unquote Islamic advisor, but he told him nothing this evil could have come from religion. And Bush bought it and told us, lied to himself, lied to us, brings the Quran into the White House, is proud about it. Of course he didn't crack it open and read it. And he sends our troops into war, into hell, without knowing where he sent them and for what. And this is scary because these are people with power. And it's only gotten worse under Obama, clearly. There's a Western Muslim called Bassam Tibi. He understands Islamic peace, and he writes, those who resist Islam cause wars and are responsible for them. That's the mentality, Islam means peace when the whole entire world gets submitted to Islam. Now it's one thing for liberals, one thing for foolish individuals to say these things about Islam, but again, for the President of the United States of America to do that, he crippled our war effort from right out of the gate. And then we also hear about Bush. He was Israel's greatest friend. You can't be Israel's greatest friend and still fund the quote-unquote Palestinian terrorists. You can't be Israel's friend and push for elections to a country that where the only ones who would run are terrorist groups. 70% of them, I think, support suicide killing. And that's our enemy. Israel's enemy is our enemy. The enemy promotes Islam. We promote Islam. I mean, do they promote American values? The only time they use American values is to try to sell Islam to us. They can't use Islamic values to sell Islam to us. They have to use the words peace, tolerance, and justice. And, the enemy, we try to be for Islam and for America without paying any price for it. And this is, I think, a real issue, especially in America, where religion is respected across the board with absolute, with no problem at all. That a religion is the core motivation for the death and destruction that the civilized world is defending itself against is too much for many to bear. Even more than a death and destruction, apparently. That actual religion calls for the murders of innocent human beings because they're not under the yoke of Islam. And when I say Islam, I mean Islam according to Islam. There are a lot of individuals who I admire, even they use prefixes and suffixes, and Islamism this, is Islamism that, totalitarian Islam, Islamic radicalism. The one problem with that is that they can't distinguish Islam proper from what they're trying to tell us. That's a big problem. And it diminishes the argument that we have against this enemy. But of course, in a country where the individual is important, as it is in America, still is, unlike in Islamic countries. If you criticize Islam, you are accused of condemning all Muslims. I don't know how many times people have told me, about my work. So you're saying all Muslims are terrorists? I said, no, you said that. I didn't say that. Your average Muslim, in all seriousness, is morally superior to Muhammad, morally superior to Islam itself. It's organized Islam. It's the consistent practitioners of Islam who are the problem, who are our problem. And, they're individual human beings, like my family. I still have a Muslim family who consider themselves Muslim. They never read the Quran. They never intend to read the Quran. I might be the only, one in my family who actually has read the Quran. And it is tough to read. Probably the biggest chore I've ever done in my entire life. I thought I could reread it. And I said, I can't reread this. At a certain point, I just couldn't. It was too mind-numbing. Then I realized I did reread it a few years ago, and I forgot that. It's become such a part of me now, such a part of my work. Most Westerners, most of us want to believe that the nice individual Muslim they know personifies Islam. I don't know how many times I've heard people say, well, I know a nice Muslim, he's a nice guy. Oh, really? Is he Islam? Does he define the religion? Who defines religion? Who personifies Islam? Muhammad. What did Muhammad do? Figure that out, So objectively good human beings who identify themselves as Muslim give Islam a good face, a good name, one far better than it deserves. This gives us a false impression of what we're facing, with just another excuse not to face it. A good Muslim by Western standards is a bad Muslim by Islamic standards. I think I'm, what are the moderate Muslims, that we hear about, that we're told are the most crucial allies in this war? When I think of Muslim allies, I think of all lies. That just word breaks it apart. They've chosen to be, most Muslims have chosen to be sheep to their jihadist wolves. They don't say anything against jihad. They don't think it's their place to say anything, because a part of them knows, even if they're not that devout, that these are the consistent practitioners. That these are the Muhammad wannabe Muslims out in the world. And even if they, like individuals like Urshad Manji, she still considers herself a Muslim. And while she may be a decent human being, according to our standards, she hurts the argument against Islam when she says that Islam needs to return to its clever, fun-loving roots. And when I hear that, it's just such a lie. She hurts herself, she hurts her own credibility. The funny thing is, if it can be funny at all, is that the reason we're not fighting, and the reason the enemy's fighting, is the same reason, Islam. We're not fighting because it's a religion. We're not fighting because they're trying to respect the religion, and they're fighting in the name of the religion. It's the absolute respect for religion in this country which has allowed Islam to have its way with us across the world. Not just America, Europe, who knows where the hell it's going. Islamic hell, maybe. Who else used peace in order to more successfully wage war? What other character? A lot of evil people have done it, but Islam's favorite infidel, again, Hitler. He said, National Socialist Germany wants peace because of its fundamental convictions. Germany needs peace and desires peace. Well, if Islam means peace, is he speaking about Islam? No. And I say this as one who was raised by non-devout Muslims, but nonetheless admired Hitler. Hitler referred to Islam, he was an admirer of Islam, he called it a quote-unquote masculine religion. And in World War II, the Muslim world was in bed with the Nazis. The Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, who I believe was Arafat's uncle, ended up in Germany. He wanted to expedite the Holocaust for Islamic reasons, of course, not for Nazi reasons. Then when I think about the enemy, I think about them, they're absolutely doing what they're supposed to be doing, according to Islam. Unlike us, we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing to defend ourselves to the hilt by telling the truth and acting on it. And they're counting, the Muslim world was counting on us not to do what we have to do, as they've counted on all the cultures that they've buried under jihad. In their mind, they're counting on the fact that we're not Muslim, that we're not ruthless, that we're not going to do whatever it takes to do to defeat the enemy. That we don't have it in us to do what we need to do. And to our advantage, the enemy comes from, if one advantage we have is true, the enemy, it comes from a warlike culture. It doesn't know how to wage war. They can't fight for, if their lives depended on it, and their lives do depend on it when they suicide bomb. That's the only thing that they can actually get away with when they come into our country, with the airplanes, use them as missiles. I'm thinking about post 9/11, after studying everything I could about Islam. I probably did a little too much research. I got really bogged down. But I wanted to own it. I wanted to know it because I wanted to know what the enemy thinks, what they would do. And my story is basically, it's as if I took myself and split myself in two. It's twin brothers, Albanian Muslim background. And on 9/11, they have completely diametrically opposed reactions. One leaves Islam and decides to create a superhero against the enemy. And in thinking about the enemy despises pigs. So he wears pigskin leather. His name is Pigman. He's ex-Muslim himself. And he's as ruthless as anyone that they've ever come across. He does the things that they're counting on that we won't do. And looking at the world we live in today, with the way the politicians are waging the war, they're not allowing our soldiers to defeat this enemy. They're not allowing them to kill them even, to the point where they have to allow a guy to set a bomb. If he's walking away, well, at that moment, he's not an actual threat, so don't kill him. They allow funerals of Taliban members, hundreds of them, to remain, quote-unquote, unkilled for political reasons. And, the first thing I thought about, though, post 9/11, the first thing I thought about was Captain America. Captain America, World War II, fought the Nazis. Literally is punching out Hitler on the first issue of #1, Captain America #1. So my first thinking was, okay, I think Captain America would be a good way to go about this. Until it hit me that Marvel Comics, who owns Captain America, would never allow Captain America to do or to say what I think he should say and do against the enemy. That's when I pulled back and started thinking about the enemy and what kind of, hero that would be their worst nightmare, which is ex-Muslim, ruthless, big, dressed in pigskin leather. And I've been trying to get traction with my book for years. I haven't been able to. Editors, publishers, agents, even if those who were interested, they still felt it was too much, and they cited Muslim reprisal. understand. But I still have to keep going. So I self-published a collection of my blog work called Propaganda, Drawing the Line Against Jihad. It was basically a few years worth of blog material that I used to keep myself, excited, interested, and have some work out there while I'm doing my story, because my story has taken years now to actually get together. And I ended up releasing chapter 1 digitally, not that long ago. And in the post 9/11 world, the comic book world has decided not to take Islam seriously at all, or even jihad. The first things that came out post 9/11 were benefit books, and they never mentioned the enemy. And now it seems like it's all coalescing into this month, 2011, 10 years later, where a lot of comic books are coming out dealing with the post 9/11 world, but of course dealing with in ways that I think is dishonest, stupid. There's one book called Habibi. I call it an ode to Islam. It might as well be. The cartoonist, this is all I need to say about the book, I think. He said, well, this book is more about being ashamed of being an American than any attack on Islamic society. And then there's another book called The Big Lie. What an appropriate title. It's basically a truther comic that we call as 9/11 America. We brought it on, we blew up the buildings. And then there's another pretty safe book, deals with Osama bin Laden, the killing of Osama bin Laden. And then there's probably the most influential, popular cartoonist of our time, Frank Miller. He's working on a book. Well, actually, the book should be out. It was supposed to be out today. I tried to get it. I couldn't get it. Barnes & Noble said it was in the warehouse, but maybe they're trying to hold it off. I don't know. It's the first comic book besides mine that actually takes on the enemy in a pretty ruthless way, from what I gather. And Frank Miller was working on the book for years. It was originally a Batman book, Batman versus al-Qaeda. And I don't know if it was him that pulled the plug on that or DC Comics. Who knows? I imagine it was DC Comics. But he still followed through, and he changed the character a bit, changed his name. And I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be something strong, as opposed to the other ones. And speaking about Batman, Mark brought it up in the introduction. Batman recently went global. He's branding himself. So he had the French Muslim counterpart, Nightrunner. And I made a cartoon on David Horowitz's newsroom blog that dealt with the worst case scenario of that situation, where his Muslim Batman blows up the Eiffel Tower. And Alfred tells him, Master Bruce, he calls him Bruce at this point. He leaves out the master. He says, I told you should have really read about Islam before you recruited a devout Muslim to be a Batman. And then the Joker is in the bottom part of the cover, and he's laughing. Islam means peace. He says Islam means peace, and he's cackling away about it because he knows the joke. And through that, some news sources picked up some comments I made about it, because at the end of that cartoon I said, if you're as sick and tired of this Islamic crap as I am, check out my book. You might be interested in it. And clearly that word, I think, was the word that got the interest of the Daily Show, Jon Stewart's Daily Show. And they invited me to be on based on that. I had 2 long conversations with them prior to that. They led me to believe that it would be one of their producers who I knew of until I got there. When I got there, it was the interviewee would be their Muslim liberal, Asad Mandvi. I said, okay. The kind of work I do, I don't get easily rattled about that. So we're going back and forth for 3 hours, literally 3 hours, and it ended up airing only 3 minutes of it. But it was interesting, it was good, and however bad it was, some people said it was terrible, they made it look like a bigot. They could have done a lot worse. And I needed that kind of traction. A few years before that, an old agent that I had for my first book tried to interest him in the Infidel, and he wouldn't go for it. He thought a character like Pigman and someone who would create him in this kind of world is quote unquote unrealistic. And I told him, well, I created him, I exist. But he wouldn't touch it. And again, it's understood. I mean, I do this because I feel compelled to do this. Other people just don't do it for whatever reason. They're dishonest, who knows. My background clearly put something on me where I said I have to take this on in as honest a way as I possibly can. And through that, I was on the show, going back and forth. And one of the most important questions he asked was, "What's wrong with a Muslim Batman?" And I said, "What's wrong with Batman during World War II recruiting a German to be his German Batman with no reference to Nazis? What's wrong with that? We're at war. This is what we're dealing with here." And of course, he can't see that, didn't want to see that. And it was one little thing. I think it's worth mentioning. Back and forth with the liberal Muslim. He said the word Islamic crap. He was quoting me. I said, "Yeah, Islamic crap. Islam means peace. I'm Muslim Batman. It's Islamic crap." He goes, "How about Islam?" I don't know if I can say it. Curse. Is that okay? He said, "How about Islamic shit?" And I said, No. Islamic crap rolls off the tongue a little better." He goes, "How about Islamic doo-doo?" I said, "No, Islamic crap." So we were going back and forth. And we were also talking about certain things like, I was talking about the Islamization of Europe, the Islamization of America, and what the enemy's trying to do. They're trying to smuggle Islam into our culture in every which way that they can. And he said, "You mean Islamicizing?" I said, "No, Islamization." He was Islamicizing, back and forth, back and forth. He said, "Oh, yeah, that's the Muslim exercise." I said, "Yeah." I said, "They do it 5 times a day." And they cut a few things from the show. I don't know if any of you have seen it. I think it's worth watching. It's to see what they do, because they cut that answer that I gave him. The answer that I gave him about why would Batman have a German Muslim during World War II, they cut that out entirely. They had me say something like, well, because he'd be a jihadist or something. And he would, but that wasn't my answer. They actually cut it. And then DC Comics. DC Comics got in bed with a Muslim publisher who produces a comic book that Mark mentioned called The 99. It's the Muslim superheroes. And the problem I have with Muslim superheroes, especially written by Muslims, is they never, ever, ever mention the jihad. If their Muslim superheroes fought jihadists, I said, okay, it's against Islam, but I'm with you. These are bad guys. They were, you had, and one interesting thing I remember, no one else caught it, I'm pretty tuned into this type of stuff. Wonder Woman, months before that team-up, wore more, basically she wore a jacket, she wore pants, she was more covered than she's ever been in decades. And I think they did that to set up the crossover, because now she's back to her shorts and her top and all her skin showing. So they even kowtow to that, I believe. Of course, they wouldn't admit to it. Why would they? And then this whole thing is in service of trying to sell us that Islam means something that it's not. And it's pretty insidious, because they're dealing with comic books, and a lot of, I read comic books still, older people do, but a lot of kids do as well. And that's their purpose. And when you got Obama back in that comic up, it's no good. And about Obama, I just want to mention something. He's probably the only ex-Muslim. He was born to a Muslim father, raised by a Muslim stepfather. Went to a Quran class in Indonesia for 4 years. He's the only ex-Muslim I know who is uncritical about Islam. Who's completely praised Islam at every chance he gets. Either they're silent or they're critical. I don't know of any other type. And his Christianity to me was a political decision to me. That's why I see it. He looked across America and said, most Americans are Christian? Okay. If I'm going to be president, that's what I have to be. So DC, they pushed this down our throats. And I did get the first comic, and it was terrible. Mediocre, beyond belief. Their enemy was some undefinable threat. And wherever else this is, it's Islamic propaganda. It's being released during a war, being waged against us by Islam's most consistent practitioners. It's one thing for DC Comics to avoid the reality of jihad in their comics, but quite another to allow the big 3 superhero icons to be used to sell today's big lie. I know comic books are meant to be fantasy, but this is too much. And regardless of the seemingly mild nature of the man behind this, he's a Muslim, Dr. Naif al-Matawa, who lived in America and moved to Kuwait after 9/11. I found that a little interesting. It's a false version of Islam he's selling here, since the only way you can mainstream Islam for a Western audience is by lying about it. This shows how trapped even the most Western Muslims are by their own religion, that they have to go outside of their religion for them to make Islam at all appealing to non-Muslims, and even to themselves. It doesn't matter if it's a self-delusion or dissimulation driving those behind this Islamic comic, and that's why I refer to them as the Islamic comics. The result is the same. Islam is again being presented as something it's not, in order to appeal to the ignorant, to those who want to believe. I mean, one thing about Islam is peace. It wouldn't work if we didn't want to believe it. That's a dangerous thing as well. And, you know, American superheroes fought America's enemies in World War II. Superman, Batman, Captain America, they all did. The country the cartoonists got behind because they were American. They were all being threatened. Today they act as if it's something that's not going to hit them in any way. But, you know, not only do they stay clear from jihadist comics, now the most popular of them also team up with sugar-coated Muslim superheroes for the express purpose of making Islam look good. And, you know, I'll end this, talk before I get to my cartoons by saying that Muhammad Atta, the ringleader of the 9/11 hijackers, if I remember also, I think only the pilots knew that it was a suicide mission. The other ones didn't know. They thought it was a quote-unquote traditional hijacking. But anyway, Muhammad Atta told his victims, stay quiet and you'll be okay. And we've stayed quiet. We're not okay. And, you know, we've stayed complacent. We don't want to know what Islam means. 10 years later. And my thing is, if telling the truth about something can get you killed, then that truth needs to be told again and again and again and again. And acting on that truth will save us. Thank you very much. So I show some of my cartoons over the years about Islam. I think this is pretty self-explanatory. I'm sorry. I think this is pretty self-explanatory, this one. We say anything but Islam. And the problem I have with those who say, you know, Islamism and all this is they can't make the case, apart from Islam, why they do so. Islam is what it is. We have to recognize that. This is the twins of my story, the Infidel. And I'm pushing the dualism, clearly the factor of dualism within Islam, within a book. Sorry. Is that good? Thank you. Yeah, these are the twin brothers, Killian Duke on the left and Salam Duke on the right. And the only difference between them is Killian has blue eyes and Salam has green eyes. Green is the color of Islam, Muhammad's favorite color. So I just want to make that little tweak in there. And the facial hair, of course. But that's the Albanian eagle on the Albanian flag. And I thought it was pretty interesting, just the idea of having twin brothers, one going one way, one going the other. I use it as a backdrop. And then behind that is the Twin Towers. And if you look close within the faces of the shadows, you see Pigman on Killian's face and Super Jihad, which is Pigman's arch nemesis. And he's also a Muslim who turns jihad after 9/11. This is Islam's deal. If you're not Muslim, you're guilty. There's no way around that. The only way you become, you know, when they speak about innocence in the Muslim world, they're speaking about Muslims. You know, when innocents are killed. Okay, this one I did basically in the last 30 years, ever since Iran became the Islamic Republic of Iran, through the weakness of Jimmy Carter, we've been appeasing them. And even Reagan, 241 Marines were murdered by Hezbollah through Iran, you know, they're a proxy of Iran, and Reagan pulled out and did nothing. And he regretted it, from what I heard. But that's not good enough. Osama bin Laden watches that and says, wow, we can get away with this. We can really hit them with a strong president even. And so that's why it fit perfectly within the nuclear symbol. Iran, if you notice. This was in support of Geert Wilders, the most honest politician on earth about Islam. And this is the take on the Spartacus film. And that's my support for Geert Wilders, or Geert Wilders to be exact. Okay, this was a story, if you remember, I think it was last year. Last year, Egyptians were accusing Israel of somehow controlling sharks to kill Egyptians in the ocean. So I said, okay, Islam Motion Pictures presents, It was pretty fun. Okay, this basically the post 9/11 world that we live in. We're trying to build mental blocks, and that's part of it. Literally in the blocks with a peace sign as a plane. Sorry, I have to say it. I think it's obvious. Okay. Okay, this is Muhammad. This is a drawing I did last year for the, I think it was Molly Norris, the one who started the Everybody Draw Muhammad Day. She pulled out the next day and she goes, oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. And that's the worst thing you could do against these guys, because they will come after you harder. If you go full throttle, I think they're a little confounded because we are supposed to be afraid of them. And that's how I see Muhammad. I drew him.
I'm sorry, why not add the word Muhammad?
I do have two other drawings of Muhammad on my blog if you want to see. Yeah. So because to me, submitted, that's what he wants. It's like, to me, that's a play off the old Obama Change Hope poster. So Muhammad's poster is submit. And of course, green being his favorite color again. Okay. Okay, this to me is the most horrific. This is in chapter 1 of the Infidel. And I had to show it. I can never forget it. And one thing that really struck me is one of the books I read literally dozens of books on post 9/11, is that some of the people who were watching the jumpers said that they were screaming. The jumpers weren't screaming. And our government officially says that, oh, they didn't jump. There's an organization that deals with the deaths on 9/11, and on official record they said they didn't jump. They were blown out the windows, they were pushed, who knows what. They have to believe that, like they have to believe Islam means peace. But that to me is the most horrific thing. And when they say that these people committed suicide, they didn't commit suicide. What choice did they have? Burn alive or not? That's it. That's the choice that they had. And I had to put it in the book because it all begins with 9/11. The book begins on 9/11, The Infidel, where Frank Warner, who's Pigman, who ends up being Pigman, sees the horror up close and personal. And his friend sees the horror as well. But what his friend says, he drops to his knees and prays to Allah when he sees the second tower get hit. Because at that point, you know it's Islam, it's jihad. Okay. This is Ron Paul's foreign policy. And the foreign policy of many politicians, right, left. He's, I don't know if you've seen him in the debates recently, the way he's insane. He's insane, and he should not be president. He should not be even senator or governor or whatever. I think there's nothing more to say about him. Okay, this is Pigman, pigskin leather, and his symbol. I thought about a design for a while. I said, what would he wear? And then I thought about Superman's S. I thought about the Twin Towers. I thought about a symbol for the dollar, capitalism. And that's what it is. The S represents September 11th. Also, when it goes off to the left, it's 9/11. And then even further, the right tower has the 2 marks to make a 3, 93. Now, I was thinking Flight 93, but it can also go for the first attack on the Twin Towers, 1993, when, quote-unquote, only 6 people died. And that attack alone, I mean, they wanted to kill 100,000 people. They wanted those towers to fall side to side. And the guy didn't have enough, I guess, money to make a bigger bomb. But they've been trying to hit that for years, and that's why I can imagine that the people who were there in those buildings on the day of 9/11, they probably ran the hell out. They didn't listen to the broadcasters say, oh, just stay in the building, don't worry about it. Okay, that's all. Okay, first I thought Pigman. Then I thought, what would be worse than Pigman to face the enemy? Well, pig woman. But then I said, well, I wouldn't want a woman doing the things that Pigman's got to do, and that's not being, you know, I'm not being sexist here. But he does some brutal things, and I wouldn't want to see that. So that's it. Okay, this is a cartoon I did when Obama called for the return to the 1967 borders. I said, okay, where was Obama in 1967? He was in Indonesia. He was taking his Quran class. He was being taught that the Jews are the scum of the earth. And he takes that with him. Even the old day when he slipped up, janitor. Jew and janitor, that doesn't, I don't know how you can mix up the two words. So that was my point. So where was he? He was there. Okay. These are the characters in the Infidel, Salam, Duca, the Muslim, Killian Duke, and that's Super Jihad. And clearly trying to push his look to direct it towards a certain way. That's it. This is one of the most popular images in the book, Propaganda. It says everything. He wants to, you know, terrify them. They're terrorists? He's like, okay, I'll be their terrorist. I will terrify them. And they are terrified of him. And especially when they hear that he has pigskin leather, they sure as hell don't want him grabbing their beard. You know, they might not get to paradise. They might be tainted by that point. All right. Okay, to me, Islamic's piece is the Trojan camel, you know, and it's camouflage. It's true. I mean, this is the way for them to try to use our values against us. We love peace. We want peace. They said, well, you know what? Let's say Islamic's peace. Let's give them what they want. They want peace. Well, let's say that. And it's worked to an extent. But I don't know if it works as much anymore. I really don't, especially with books like Frank Miller's book coming out, with my work, with other artists out there. That's it. Okay, the war on error. The war on error. And if you notice, the bullet shots are to the left. You know, it's the leftists who are shooting. The core is Islam, Jihad, Sharia law. Those are things we should be fighting. And we're not. We're fighting terror. You can never win against Jihad if you fight quote-unquote terror. Ever. What, fight an emotion? Fight a feeling? We know that. Okay, this was something I did a while ago, but there's an organization called Twin Towers Go Global. And they said, we want to know where you would rebuild the towers. And I said, okay, why not in Mecca? Towering the Kaaba to let them know that we tower over you. And the good thing is that it won the most votes out of anyone in, it was a showing in New York, and by a wide margin, it won the favorite popular vote, which is great. I mean, because some of them I've seen on there, terrible. They really were lousy. So I think that might be the last one. So if anyone has any questions, thank you.
Thank you so much. I think your work is so important and so terrific. I feel so empowered watching what you do.
I appreciate that. I'm sorry, I'm a little unpolished as a speaker. It's my first talk. I tried to do the best I could. Yes.
What do you think? Is this on? Yes, it is. What do you think Bush should have done after 9/11?
I think you should have studied Islam. I think you should have sent some bombs into the terrorist countries, into the greatest state sponsors of terrorism, Saudi Arabia and Iran. To hell with our quote-unquote friendship with the Saudis. Just to let them know, you can't kill Americans and get away with it. You need immediate justice, whatever that calls for. If it calls for bombing their holy places, quote unquote, that's what it calls for. He should have done Islam 101. He should have figured out who the hell the enemy is and go after them and end the threat within, what, a month, 2 months? You know, what's stopping us besides us? We have the power to wipe them off the face of the earth. We don't even have to. We just have to take out a few major points and say this war, this jihad, is over. And you know, it's only in a post-jihad world where the Muslim world could possibly have a chance at knowing what it is to be human, outside of Islam. Because when they get a chance to vote, what do they vote for? Islam. Sharia law.
Thank you, really.
Thank you.
For what you're doing. Do you see a spike in sales for your book each time you get publicity somewhere?
Yeah, I do.
And so, because that sort of underground guerrilla marketing is really a great way to go.
It is.
Is there anybody on the side of the Islam planning for, or even concerned about the fact that if there is another attack, that not even a president that says their religion of peace is going to save them? Do they really believe that the American people are not going to rise up and rip their guts out?
I think they do. We've shown them nothing else. We really haven't. They're still alive. They're still in business. Iranians are still threatening us. The Saudis are sitting pretty. They're there and they're just like, well, you know, we own them. They own Bush. They own Obama. You know, Bush, the first thing he did was he couldn't wait to get one of the Saudi guys into Crawford to show that, hey, we're good. No, we're not good. And especially Iran. Iran is, you know, we should have taken care of them 30 years ago. You know, so from their perspective, we're chumps, and they're going to take us. From their perspective, we have to prove them wrong, and we haven't yet. And I think with work like this, what it does, if it gets in the mainstream, it starts making people comfortable with the idea that there's a problem with Islam. I forget about what Islam actually is, and they don't have to study it, but there's a real problem here, and we got to deal with it, and we got to start calling it by its name, Islam. I have a piece. I do recommend people writing it because to me, it was my reaction to all of the isms, you know, all the prefixes and suffixes of Islam. It's called Calling Islam Islam, and why we should. Because we didn't deal with, you know, radical Nazism, World War II, fascist communism. We call them by their names. They are what they are. They're totalitarian, every single last one of them, and they got to be defeated.
It's interesting to see that you came from a background of being raised as a Muslim, and yet you grew away from that, learned to think about it, and came to an understanding of the nature of Islam. Is there any way you can suggest that the U.S. or the West can encourage, or we can personally encourage, such a trend among others so that many people will realize the falsity of the way they've been raised and reject it?
Through force, I don't think so. I mean, outside of force, outside of force, I don't think so. Because their hearts and minds are owned by Islam. We've been trying to win their hearts and minds for 10 years. At what cost? You know, thousands and thousands of lives, American lives, innocent civilian soldiers, in the cause of trying to win their hearts and minds. And Islam owns them, probably will always own them. And the benefit that I had was being raised in America. I saw that Jews were not the scum of the earth. They were good people. I had friends. I saw that women could actually have a life and be happy, unlike we were raised and told. And I mean, even for the non-devout Muslim, it was very rare for one of my cousins not to beat his wife regularly. That was a given. You know, this is what it is. And those who are born and raised under Islamic countries, you know, the good ones got the hell out already. They went to Europe, they came here. Outside of force, outside of a post-jihad world, they have no chance. And, you know, I'm not even concerned with the future of Islam at all, personally. I don't give a damn. I'm concerned with our future. And if we defeat the ones that are causing the wars, and then also, I mean, I'm reading this book right now, The 11th Day. It brings up the connections, the 9/11 connection with Iran and Saudi Arabia. And we always suspected that in a sense because they are the great state sponsors of terrorism. And they will ultimately have to go down in some capacity, in some way. that entire regime.
Can you tell us personally what inspired you to start drawing cartoons and expressing yourself in that way?
Well, you know what I mean. I think all kids draw, every single last one of us, and some stick to it. And I stuck to it because I remember this concretely. I was 6 years old in the Bronx. I must have been first or second grade, I don't know. And I drew a horse, and I really liked the way it came out. And everyone else loved the way it came out. The teacher and students, I said, wow, that's pretty good. So I kept going. Next thing I remember doing was a King Kong statue on the Twin Towers. It was 1976 when that second bad film came out. And throughout my whole elementary school, middle school, high school, I won contests. I developed my art by myself. The only course I really took later on were night classes in New York. And post 9/11, I knew I'm not a soldier. I do want to kill. I felt like killing. I think a lot of us did, if we admitted it or not. But I said, you know what? Let me find my way as an artist, and kill them through my art. In that sense, literally. I mean, Pigman. It's not. People say it's power fantasy. It sure is. I mean, it definitely is a power fantasy. If I had the power, that's what I would do. I would take it to them. Put them down like the mad dogs they are.
What future do you see for the United States with the current administration behavior along these lines?
Well, if we don't get him out in this next election, it's a terrible future on a lot of levels. I think he's going down now. I do. I think because if the election was last year, if it was right now, he's out. It's not even a question. Things will get better. What does that mean? He'll make things better? No, because he won't get better. He's not a good guy. When you got a bad guy in charge of a good country, this is what happens. And it's not just quote-unquote partisan. My one thing about Obama is 2008, the deal breaker for anyone, I think, should have been the fact that he was friends with an unrepentant terrorist, Bill Ayers. Do you need to know? What more is there to know? He had his coming out party at his house in 1995. He ran a school to the ground with him as a colleague. And the guy is, it was perfect. He did an interview with New York Times, and they published September 11, 2001, where he's standing on top of an American flag, and he says, I didn't do enough. We should have did more. Unrepentant. And that's who our president is friends with. And that's all. He has no problem with violence. He has no problem with terrorism. Just doesn't want to engage in it directly, I guess. And one thing Bill Ayers probably thought was, this guy's pretty slick. Let's see how we can bring it all down from within. Let's do that. Let's do it a different way. A more moderate terrorism, So.
I have a question.
Okay.
First, I want to say thank you for being so brave.
Thanks.
Here. And the artwork that you were doing before 9/11,
Yeah.
do you have any plans to go back to that?
Funny, yeah.
And the other question is, where do you see yourself with your artwork in 10 years? Are you still? There's so much material here, but
There was. I had a number of books that I had in mind pre 9/11, fantasy books. There was one that I definitely will still continue after I'm done with this one. It's totally different. But yeah, 9/11 came and plans changed. I had to respond to them in the way I have through Pigman, the Infidel. And yeah, I think I didn't have a direction in a lot of ways. I wanted to draw comics. I knew that I had a philosophy that I wanted to try to instill in my comics, but 9/11 just brought it all together, brought my background into it. I said, I got a story here. And the best way I could tell it through my art, write it and draw it. I don't know. Thanks. Any other questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I give you a lot of credit and courage
Thank you.
Standing against Islam. I think it's nice that you're expressing your view, but I'm being pessimistic about that. There's 1.5 billion Muslims, maybe 54 countries, and it's too late.
57, as Obama said.
57, and I think it's too late to change them, or...
No, I think so too.
The best way to do, like, instead of expressing these views of, hate to Islam, maybe perhaps...
Well, Islam hates us. This is a counter-reaction to that hatred.
But if we treat it the same way as they are, so...
I'm a cartoonist. They're killers.
Right.
It's a big difference.
I'm a very right Zionist. I grew up in Israel and I hate Arab even more than anybody else. But what I'm trying to say is perhaps the idea is to approach Islam and maybe to write their books, maybe explain to them that maybe their books have...
I'm not writing for them at all. I don't have one Muslim fan, I don't think, on earth. Not one. And I don't want to. 9/11 didn't change that, just made me say, okay, let's find out what the truth is about this enemy. And you tell the truth. It's as simple as that. And if they kill you, then you really got to tell the truth. You can't not tell it. Oh, they'll kill me, so I'll shut up. What kind of world would we be in if we were silent? The Muslim world. But do we want to be in the Muslim world? No, I want to defend ourselves in that. I want to live. I want to be happy. I want to produce my work. I want to live in a world where evil can be criticized for what it is. And those who would threaten to kill us, kill them. I mean, to me, it's very... And just tell the truth. So, I'm going to Iran next week. I'm joking. They're inviting me for a talk. I just said, sure, why not? Mahmoud, I'm Indonesia. Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
If I'm understanding you correctly, what you're saying is that we don't have to go after the whatever 1.5 billion.
No, we don't.
If we just go and cut off the head of this.
Absolutely, they will be in awe. They would, because they love power. They love power and they love force. They use it.
So, do you think that there is even a chance, a remote chance, that there is anybody in this country of leadership that you see right now who could do that, or do we have to actually wait until we're attacked and hope to defend?
I mean, there's no one on the horizon right now. My guy was John Bolton. Yeah. I liked him. He understands the country. He understands that world. He's willing to write a blurb for Robert Spencer's book, which for a diplomat is pretty damn interesting for the stealth jihad. And when he pulled out, I was like, oh man. So now we're stuck with a guy, Rick Perry, who, like Bush, Islam means peace, tolerance, all that, and he stinks as a debater on top of that. But Mitt Romney, who was very articulate about Islam and jihad 2008 during the election, he actually used the word jihad, which is like, okay, good. But now he says jihad has nothing to do with Islam. So he just knocked himself out from my mind. And plus, Romney care. It's terrible. I call him Submit Romney. You know, please submit now. Get out. He's terrible. Chris Christie? He goes after the unions like no one does. But when it comes to Islam, he's as weak as any of them. About the Ground Zero Mosque, he has nothing to say about it. Nothing. He says, that's a political football people. Yeah, but what do you think? We're asking you. And he appoints a Muslim judge who has links with some, Muslim groups, Muslim Brotherhood. What more do we need to know about him? I mean, we're commander-in-chief will have to deal with this enemy. If someone doesn't actually know their stuff about Islam and jihad, to me, they're a waste.
Sarah Palin.
She probably would be tougher than anyone right now. I mean, against the jihad at least. She probably would.
During the Cold War with Russia, and now with Islam, I think, I would hope in your comic somehow, or your book, you point out to the American people that one of our worst enemies is our own State Department.
Oh, yeah.
Because when they told Reagan you cannot call the Soviet Union the evil empire, I mean, it scares me to think the kissing the ass of the Muslim world the way they do. And I really believe a lot of these presidents are up. It's the State Department that causes it. It's not the president.
Well, the president can defy the State Department. You could tell them this is what it is, because Reagan didn't want to say evil empire. Even his speechwriter crossed it out. He put it back in. This is the evil empire. This is evil. And the day when the U.S. president even use the word jihad. It says jihad's evil. That's good enough right now. You know, it doesn't have to say Islam's the worst thing. Say, you know, the day we fight the war on jihad, probably gonna win it not that long after that. Because you know, you could fight terrorism forever. I'm sorry, terror forever.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.